Hi, and welcome to This Thing Called Church, episode number 10. And just stop.
What?
You guys are like, it's just so weird to see you in
I'm
person.
trying to be supportive. What do I? Okay.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Thing Called Church. Today is Wednesday, October 6th. This is episode number 10, and it's kind of another special episode because we are in a new location. Kind of find us where's Waldo in the church. So we are recording this in our new set, which I don't want to use the word set, but in our new area. We have a new table and chairs, and we are in the Purcell room, which for those who may not know where that is, it's located off of the sanctuary. It's used for kind of meetings and family events and stuff. So if you're wondering where we are in the Purcell room now. And hopefully, so this is recording in person.
Live.
Well,
no, not live.
Not live, but we're
live.
Yes.
Thankfully.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's still I see you guys in church, but it feels weird now to be doing this at a table.
It does feel a bit odd.
Not in our little
Our box.
Zoom boxes.
Our Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch boxes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I am thankful to be able to do this
Yeah.
in person.
Yeah, us
for
too.
sure. You guys brought special mugs. You want to
We
say
did.
anything about yours?
Another gift from a church member with peace and love.
Awesome.
So I'll try to, in this half hour or whatever, make sure we maintain peace and love.
And I'm just plugging Camp Toccoa today. So
Yeah.
send
Yeah.
your kids to Camp Toccoa.
Yes. Obviously, you've got normally, so it's October, so it's still like 8 months out before your kids can go to
Yeah, but
Camp
I'm excited
Toccoa.
about
I
it.
guess you're
excited
anxious
about
for
it.
summer to
You and
come.
Cindy like mark the calendar.
Yeah, it's great. It's metal, so it kind of feels like I'm in prison, but
It's part of the standard issue when you got your little orange jumpsuit
yes.
and a roll of toilet paper.
Yeah.
That's kind of like COVID too, I guess.
Yes. So did you buy that or did you?
I have no idea. My
Okay.
wife gave it to me on the way out the door. So
Oh, here's your Camp Toccoa mug. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had, I know you don't want to keep talking about it, but you had a birthday
I did.
over the weekend.
I did.
You're still a baby compared to us.
I know.
Yeah, we're in the other club. But it was quite the birthday weekend.
It was.
And I think, so we had Fernando Ortega here on Friday. Is
Yes.
that your gift to yourself?
That was my gift to myself.
Yeah, because, it was awesome. And
Yeah, he was wonderful. I've been a fan of his for about 15 years. And so it was really good to have him come here. And we had a lot of people here.
Yeah.
A lot of people here. And he did some really cool stuff and very approachable, funny guy.
Yeah. We were kind of joking before he got here about like the green room and what kind of demands and requests. And it was, he's a celebrity, but not like a
Right.
real, not that he's not a real celebrity, but he's an entertainer.
He's a big deal.
Yeah, he's a big deal. So we were all kind of joking about that. But then to see him here and how normal and humble he
Yeah.
actually was, like he was not high demand, except, well, so Kevin, you ended up saving the whole show. Thank goodness you stepped up to helping
the
him,
day.
saving the day.
Super Kevin.
I think we have a clip of that.
It was really my wife, but thank you.
Yeah, I think we have a clip to show how you saved the day with
Yeah.
the concert.
So he was just getting ready to start. And this was actually his first public concert since February of 2020. So he's a little nervous.
I've been singing concerts for a few decades, or at least 2.5 decades, 33 decades actually. And I've never done a concert before that I don't have gum in my mouth because I always feel more secure. And tonight I have forgotten to get gum, and so I'm feeling very insecure and hoping that I can bum some gum off of somebody close by in the audience as I continue, as I stall. Make sure it's some nice, expensive gum, if that's all right. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Don't throw it. And he gave me a whole pack of gum. This is crazy. I don't know why. It is really weird to sing. I did lead worship in Nashville a couple of months ago at an event, a small event. But other than that, I've done live things where I've been able to record stuff in my house and then or do a live feed from my house. That's really great gum, Kevin. Thank you so much. But yeah, I'm just so nervous about messing things up, and I've got my cheat sheet up here with all the lyrics and everything. And then Kevin sprung it on me that there are going to be high school kids here in the front, and I'm just used to them falling asleep in the middle of my concerts. So please, make it your goal, you guys. Oh, you're very kind. I have a daughter who's 12.
That was awesome. All right, so what kind of gum was it, though?
It was extra.
Extra. What flavor? Spearmint? Winter?
But I said my
Winter
wife,
mint.
it was winter mint or something. I don't know. She went to the store at CVS, and so I was yelling at her the whole time, like, open it up, open it up. It was a brand new pack of gum. So, and I didn't know how many, he didn't really go into how many pieces he required, so that's why I gave him the whole
pack.
Well, you
pack.
never know.
Yeah, you never
You
know.
might want to like replenish at some point during the.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a shock because in choirs, you're not supposed to have gum when you
Right, that's
sing.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You can choke on it.
Did he tell all the kids afterwards when you talked to them, don't sing with gum in your mouth?
He didn't say that, but he did take pictures with us.
Yeah, he did.
He spent a lot of time with some people, so
Yeah.
young people.
It was great. It was a great, it was
He's a super talent.
so good on so many levels, right? I mean, the fact that we were able to have him here, kind of still going with, some pandemic stuff still happening. And then also the time that he spent with us and with students. And we had people from Nashville and New Jersey that
Wow.
drove all the way here just to
all
see
the way
him.
to see him.
9 hours.
Good grief.
Uh-huh.
That's a
You didn't want to drive 20 hours to see your son, so.
no. It's 31 hours.
Oh, 31. That makes
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't either.
nonstop.
You
31
complained about
hours.
that is my point. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sorry,
that was
Eli.
fantastic. Yeah. And if anyone is interested in watching it, it is on our YouTube channel. So if you go to our YouTube channel, it's there. You can watch the whole thing. And we live streamed it. It was beautiful. Great job to all that were involved. Okay, so today our topic is, you guys picked this one. I don't know which one.
Seriously.
She can throw us under the bus right now.
Just putting
And
it out
everybody's
there.
like, you remember that really boring episode of this thing? Yeah. Kevin and David chose that.
Yeah.
that topic.
Well, this is not in my toolbox. It probably should be, though. It's the way of salvation.
Yep.
Yeah, and it sounds a little scary. Probably not to you guys because you're on the other side. But to me, it's kind of like, ooh, like salvation is it's an intimidating word. I fully don't understand what it means and what are the rules behind it. I kind of, some of my thoughts when I hear of salvation is, do you have to be saved? Is it part of being saved? Can you be saved more than once? Is it one and done? Why do we need it?
Yeah.
It's going to be more than one podcast. You keep going.
Yeah.
Well, but that's kind of like where I think of it. It's kind of like, how does it fit in everyday life? And so I guess, and you also mentioned that John Wesley wrote his own. Did he write his own version of how it applies to Methodism?
Yeah. So he has a sermon called "On the Way of Salvation,"
Okay.
where he addresses this. He addresses it in other places also. He's got one, justification by faith, the circumcision of the heart, a couple of others where he addresses these questions specifically. But this was his way of thinking about how is it that God saves us?
Okay.
If we are in need of salvation, what does that mean? And then how is it that God saves us?
Okay.
How does
And
God
so
do that?
and so it varies then between religion. Like
Right. yeah.
everyone's got different
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. So for the most part, the breadth of the Christian tradition has some agreement around the dilemma we're in. like the human condition, and that we are in a bit of a mess, and for the most part, there's general agreement around that. That where we get a lot of the kind of divergence is, all right, how do we get out of that? Or how does God get us out of that? And so Wesley, as an Anglican, had his own thoughts around that. Basically, they're the teachings of the Anglican Church from the 1500s, and he just adopted that. He said he was interested in plain truth for plain people. Although if you read his sermons, they're not very plain, but it was his way of communicating to the masses. Here is how God saves us. So the via salutis, or the way of salvation, rather than in other traditions what's known as the order of salvation.
Okay.
So more of a kind of regimented. For Wesley, it was more of a way, a journey.
And I did a little bit of looking up some stuff, some words and things, but Wesley just defined salvation as not just about going to heaven. It's not an after death experience. It's a present thing. It's occurring. It's not given at once.
Right.
So that was interesting too.
Yeah. I think for Wesleyans and Methodists, it's more proper to talk about being saved, that rather than having been saved.
Okay.
That it's an ongoing process with different sort of. I don't want us to think about it too linearly.
Okay.
So that I do this step and then I do that step and then I do that.
Well, that's kind
step.
of what it was sounding like when
Yeah.
when you Google it and stuff. It sounds like there's processes and steps, and it doesn't feel very Christ-like, I guess, in a way. Like you check boxes. Like that's not really how I would think God would work. Okay, so then can you explain a little bit more into, like, okay, so you guys were talking lingo before we started about the porch and and the door and some other stuff. So is there like a metaphor or something how you can explain it normal, or not normal terms, but like on our level?
So I'll let Kevin do that. I think we have to. I think we begin with where we are. So what is the problem?
Okay, like any problem, like
or what is there a problem with humanity?
Okay.
A condition.
Yeah, is there a condition we're in? Is there some way that we're out of sorts?
Okay.
Or
There's
not
a lot
quite
of ways.
like what God intended us to be. And so the breadth of the Christian tradition says yes, there is, and that thing is called sin.
Okay.
And sin is both a condition that we find ourselves in, that we're captive to, that we can't get ourselves out of. It's also sins and the things we do that are the specific things we do that are opposed to God's will and intent for us. But that in some sense we can't. We find ourselves in a place where Wesley would say we can't help but not sin.
Right.
Right. There's.
Right.
We might want to.
Right.
We might want to not sin, but we just can't help it. It's Paul, where Paul says, "Why is it that I do the things that I seem to not want to do, and I don't seem to be able to do the things that I want to do? Who can set me free from this?" Well, the way of salvation is the way Wesley understands how God sets us free from that.
Okay.
Puts us on a path of being able to love God more fully, love our neighbors more completely, to have perfect love in our hearts. To
Like
be,
your cup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the cup. So
Like Charles Wesley says in the hymn "Love Divine," like take away our bent to sinning, that we're naturally aimed that way.
Right.
So the condition is that's how we are aimed at. And
Okay.
then Christ comes to help reorient.
Yeah,
That's the salvation.
And I don't want that to sound like what we're saying is people are inherently bad. That's not what that means. People are inherently created in God's image, right? So they're good, and God called us good. So we are God's blessed creation. But something has over time gone wrong with that. It's out of sorts. It's not aligned the way God would want it to be. Part of that has to do with God didn't create puppets. He gave us, if you to love, you have to be free to love. Love can't be forced or coerced. So if you and that means that's a risky thing, which means we might also not love. Like we might reject or love the wrong things, or love even the right things but with the wrong intensity.
Right.
So it's not that we're bad, it's that we're captive to our lesser selves and the wrong desires. And so we desire the wrong things, we love the wrong things. The love that we should give towards God and others, we give towards ourselves sometimes in our own selfish desires, and we're sort of stuck in that and can't get ourselves out. And so salvation is how we get out of that condition and back to being the people God created us to be. So salvation actually comes from the Greek word sozo, which means to heal.
Okay.
So if you
That
think
makes
of
sense.
salvation, so salvation is about the healing of our hearts, our minds, our bodies, so that they're whole and complete the way God intends them to be. And so the way of salvation is how that happens, which is, Kevin can talk about the porch and the house and the door. But
Well, what we believe is we don't save ourselves. God has to save us. And so one way that happens is through grace, this unmerited favor. So
So you just said that God saves us, we don't save ourselves.
yes.
But don't we need to, so that to me that doesn't sound like, I feel like we should be also saving ourselves, not to repent, but to
we respond and cooperate.
Cooperate with grace.
But Wesley was clear that salvation is the entire work of God. It's God who saves.
Gosh, that's crazy that like we're messing up and he's saving us.
Right.
He's I guess it's almost in a way like parenting, right? Like you watch your kid mess up and you're still always, okay, I have to change that. Because I'm like, wait, shouldn't I be the one doing all the work if I'm the one messing up and sinning? Like I should be the one making the effort. I guess is how I look at it. But you're saying that he's directing us.
Maybe a way to think of it is that God's grace always comes before anything we do.
Okay.
Right?
We call that prevenient grace.
Yeah. So the things we do to try to work out our salvation, as Paul would say, those are always in response to whatever God has done first.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So
I think Wesley kind of made that word up, right? He called it preventing grace.
Okay.
So that there was this thing that went before us, comes before us, this grace that before we even know. And that's one of the reasons why we can baptize babies.
Right.
That we know that God is acting even before we're aware of it. And so that was the porch metaphor. Is this. People talk about this all the time. So the porch is this way that we're being welcomed into salvation.
Okay.
And then there's the door, which was justifying, right? Justification. And that always confused me as a kid because we used to shout, "I'm justified" in the church I grew up. And it didn't make any sense till I started having to write papers. And if you've ever done a paper and you hit justify right or justify left or whatever, it brings everything into alignment.
Right.
And so that helped me as a college student, like, oh, that's what this justification means. And that's the moment that we are made in alignment in God. And then there's sanctifying grace or sanctification, which is inside the house. I made the joke laying on the couch, but it's actually not that, because that's the continual part that David was referring to. It's not this one and done thing. What do they say in some traditions? Once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
That you really have to continue working on your salvation.
And you can, in our tradition, you can backslide, and I don't really like that term, but other traditions use that term. But you can find yourself back outside the house.
Okay.
Again.
That's what I was wondering,
But
too.
even when you're outside of the house, you're still in the presence of and the context of God's grace. Because God's prevenient grace surrounds the entire, it's sort of infused throughout the whole of creation.
Okay.
That's why we think things like, that's why when you stand somewhere on the top of a mountain or on the beach at a sunset and you find yourself overwhelmed by whatever you're looking at and the beauty of it, that's prevenient grace. That's evidence of God's grace in God's good creation. So that it's reflecting something about who God is to us. And that, Wesley believed, it sort of sparks maybe an interest or a question or is a little bit of a nudge to get you to maybe think, well, I'll put my hand on that door and see what this means. So that even when we think, oh, I've come to Jesus, well, the reality is Jesus came to you a long time ago.
Right.
Wow.
You've just awakened to.
Right.
You
He's
have an
been there.
awareness now that God's been working in my life from before I even knew it.
Wow. Do we do we incorporate it into any of our worship services? Like, is like the prayer of confession and like is any of that stuff, like, does that kind of count towards like the working part of it?
Well, we certainly, we've been talking about practices of fruitful living. So if the practices, the disciplines, they are the ways we believe that they're not ways we earn God's grace that's given freely, but they're ways that we put ourselves in a posture of openness to receive the gift of God's presence and work in our life. And then also, so it's the way we respond to what God is doing. And then there are means of grace, that they're ways that we actually encounter more fully God's grace in our lives. So there's certainly ways that we respond and cooperate with what God is doing and wanting to do. Things like worship and prayer and singing. And
Well, even, we call it in the worship world response to the word. When after the sermon, we're usually doing the offering. All that is a response to what we're hearing. And I think I want to clarify something too. There's not 3 different types of grace. It's like the Trinity. It's all grace.
Okay.
It's just sort of how it interacts with us.
Yeah. And the hymnal, I mean, if someone on a Sunday morning pulls out the hymnal, if you look at the I don't know what you call those
They're headings, I guess.
The headings on the very top pages of the hymnal. Our hymnal is laid out according to Wesley's way of salvation. So there'll be hymns on justification, justifying grace.
Right.
There are hymns on sanctifying grace. There are hymns on Christian perfection, and so you can see that.
And it all ties
right
in with salvation. Like it's all kind of like there's these little things that are underlying with the big picture of salvation.
And what salvation, at least in our tradition, and I think just rightly understood, salvation means coming to love, to participate fully in the love of God, to participate in the relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We're caught up in that and become a part of it. And so that we experience God's perfect love in our own lives. We offer that perfect love to others. We live out of love and for love. And by love, I mean the way Jesus lived.
Yeah.
Not just any kind of sort of nice thing that we do or a warm feeling, but the way Jesus lived. And that begins now. So it begins the moment we're justified. We're made right with God, aligned with God's purpose. And we grow in that and mature in it over the course of our lifetime. And this is where the sort of life after death part comes. We believe that we experience it fully and completely when we enter into God's presence after we die and become a part of the saints, the communion of the saints. So salvation isn't a future thing, it's a present thing. And it's also a future thing.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. Do we say saved? Like we've been saved? I mean, like I know like there are religions that say that, like I've been saved, but we don't use it necessarily a lot in our
liturgy, but it's in the hymns and
Is
and,
it?
yeah, in
Okay.
the theology. I think a lot of times you'll hear the word regeneration, right? Isn't that a question on the Board of Ordained Ministry? I think is talk about regeneration, which is, I guess, probably the Methodist word for saved.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like we wouldn't come up and say, have you been saved? When were you saved?
Right.
Like we
Yeah,
don't.
no.
I don't hear that kind of.
No,
stuff
we
here.
might. I mean, it would be proper to ask, like, is there a moment when you felt like you experienced the justifying grace of God? Nobody's ever going to ask anyone that, but that's the theologically more precise. And for Wesley, that was May 24th, 1738. That was when he went to Aldersgate Street to a prayer meeting. They were reading from, this will warm your heart, the preface to Luther's commentary on the book of Romans, of all things. So that was his small group meeting. And he actually said before he went, he said, I don't want to go. He's like, I have no desire to go to this small group meeting. So very human. But he said in that meeting, as they were reading the lesson, he said, I felt my heart strangely warmed and that and put my trust in God that Christ died for even me.
Yeah.
And then like 3 or 4 days later, again, very human, he's writing in his journal, I think it's gone. Whatever feeling I experienced
Really?
3 or 4 days ago, I think it's already left me. Yeah.
Wow, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that's so reassuring though, because we all feel that way. So for him to even
And what he came to understand is that that as there are degrees of faith,
Okay,
Like
I believe that.
That God can bless someone and give to someone the fullness of faith all at once if God chooses. It works like that in some people's lives. Maybe a St. Paul. Mm-hmm. He gets knocked to the ground, blinded, and God also gives degrees of faith over the course of someone's life, so that day by day we grow a little deeper. Maybe one day we experience it a little less, the next day a little more. Maybe even seasons when God seems absent or less close. But we're still on that pathway of being made more perfect in God's love.
Yep. Totally can relate to that.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody's faith journey is their own personal experience. And it starts from when you're a baby on, and there are definitely times throughout your life where you kind of ebb and flow. That was awesome. Do you have any, that was very interesting. Just, again, it was.
Are we better than Google? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, you're much better than Google. Oh my gosh.
Nice. We should do this for a living.
I know we should. Just people could just call and we'll answer stuff.
Perfect.
Call in 9. Yeah, that's
but
what we need.
my knowledge is quite limited to a particular area.
We're not like the car guys.
If they call like my kid's got a fever, what do we do? We're going to have to call Nancy Tart or someone and say, hey, Nancy, what do we do?
Well, that was good. Again, I didn't know a lot about this topic when you guys threw it out there, and I was like, well, okay, that will be. And I think, again, I'm just the average person. When you hear certain terminology and words in religion, you've heard them and you kind of I know it, but I don't know it, and you don't know how it applies. And it's very religion and the terminology in the Bible, and it's very intimidating. And everyone's got different definitions of how things work, and so it's always good to hear it put into I don't want to use the word normal.
The vernacular. How's that?
Is that the word you said you were going to use today?
Thank you.
Is that your Google word of the day?
What is it? Plain talk? Plain talk for plain people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it's I think about it in you talk about plain truth for plain people, as Wesley put it. It can sound a little bit, when you read it in theology books and other places, it can sound a bit almost scientific and sort of process and propositional, but it really is more. Salvation's a mystery. Mm-hmm. As much as all of the great theologians have written about it, volumes and volumes and volumes about what does it mean to be saved, how does God do this, what about the person and work of Christ, how does the cross save, all of that stuff. This is not science, and the way we kind of think about science. It's more of it is a bit more of an art, and it is the way that we, and with our limited understanding, it's how we think God is at work in our lives. Mm-hmm. But we also have to do all of this with a bit of humility, knowing that we may not know the fullness of the truth.
Yeah.
But
you quoted that thing from Paul about working out your salvation, and that the line work it out with
fear and trembling.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds scary, though.
Yeah, well,
that's
fear
Paul.
in the sense of reverence, not terror.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Not like serial killer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Halloween's coming. Not
Yeah.
that kind of,
No.
not that kind of fear.
More like awe.
Aw.
There you go.
Anything else you'd like to add about that?
No.
Okay. Very, very good. Upcoming announcements. Book study is still going on. I think we have two more sermon series on that.
2 more.
And then we also have our stewardship campaign, which is starting to kick off, and people should be receiving their estimate of giving cards in the mail and a letter this week. And we just ask that people bring them back to worship on October 17th.
Right.
Yep. Did you want to add anything else about that?
Yes. We've kind of been, the 5 practices of fruitful living have sort of been a broad look at stewardship, how we steward all of life well, not only our financial resources. This Sunday we're going to talk about generosity some. So folks will, on the 10th, October 10th, we'll talk about generosity. So we will focus a little bit on financial fruitfulness. But really, it's about, and there'll be a time on the 17th when folks can bring their card and say, this is what I think I can commit for the coming year, or covenant with God to try to do. And I want folks to know it's not a contract. No one is, like, you can't default on this. There's abundant grace in it, and life changes. And so you make it's really about having a discipline to say, I'm going to try to, it's like saying, I'm going to try to exercise 4 days a week. I'm going to try to our family will try to make this kind of financial commitment this year. If we have a more generous year, maybe we'll give more. If things don't turn out like the way we hope they will, maybe we'll have to give a little bit less. But it's a way to kind of have a discipline about it. And we'll do that on the 17th. Folks can bring those up. We're going to have Holy Communion that day as well, and we'll wrap up the book study that Sunday.
Great. Well, that's a wrap. I mean, we're like, I know this time always goes by so fast.
It does.
It always feels intimidating before we start, but yeah, we're good with our episode, and it was nice to do it in person. I think we'll get more comfortable sitting around the table as we do more of these. But thank you for everybody who has been watching these episodes and following along. We appreciate your support, and we'll be back in 2 weeks from the Purcell Room. Take care and have a great day.
I got my Camp Toccoa mug.
I like that. Is it?
I'm not trying to compete. It's just I felt like.
Is it metal?
Yeah. It's like a prison mug.
Tin.
Yeah. Like after a hard day on the back 40, you dip that down in the well and.
That's exactly right.
Did you
drink some sewer water?
Did your kids buy that for you?
I have no idea where we got this.
All right, so we'll talk about our new location that we're in this room, the Purcell Room. Mm-hmm. Anybody? Oh God, you can't go that close.
The Purcell Studio.
The Purcell
We're in the Purcell Studio.
Good afternoon, David. Because we released in the afternoon, right?
In the evening.
Yeah.
So it'll be like the 5 o'clock news. Yeah.
Here's Kevin. Weather. It's cloudy.